Venezuela poised to join the BRICS group this year, 2024? Well, today we will discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
A few days ago, the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro announced that Venezuela is poised to join the BRICS nations group soon. And now, is this possible? It's a real probability that Venezuela will join the BRICS nations? Well, it's very likely. First, Maduro praised that the BRICS nations are creating this new world order. Well, I'm just paraphrasing his speech. And of course, now there are some tensions between the West, the G7 nations, and the other sphere of countries. And of course, Venezuela, the Venezuelan government is very attracted to this particular idea. And also he mentions the BRICS Development Fund Bank, that it will be something like the IMF or the World Bank. And Venezuela is also very interested to gain access to such institutions. Now, how likely is that Venezuela will be joining the BRICS nations? Well, it's very, very, very possible. It's a probability. It has a great deal of probability. And actually, some analysts, the ones that are not as sophisticated, just mentions that Venezuela is already on the BRICS group. Is not quite the case. First, let's start defining the BRICS nations and how this particular institution works. Well, first, BRICS is an acronym of, it was originally 4 nations: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And after that, South Africa joined just when this institution started. Of course, at first it was just tongue-in-cheek, something mentioned by a couple of journalists on particular publications, but they materialized this particular endeavor and made it true. Now, how important are the BRICS nations? Well, right now, regarding GDP adjusted for purchasing power, the BRICS nations, the original 5 founding members, have 36% of GDP, of adjusted GDP, purchasing power parity adjusted. Meanwhile, the G7 nations, the US, the UK, Japan, France, I forgot the other, the legacy brand countries, the 7 legacy brand countries, they have around 30% of the purchasing parity adjusted GDP of the world. And they have been a little bit stagnated. Meanwhile, it's assumed that the economic growth and economic development will be occurring on these particular emerging markets instead of the G7 nations. Now, that doesn't mean, and I'm not, most people that support the BRICS group initiative, they think that the West is going to fall down and it's going to end or something like that. The dollar is will be no longer the world's reserve currency. And I'm not a fatalist regarding the fate of the G7 nations. I think they reach a ceiling, a glass ceiling. They are stagnated right now of these dubious policies that have countries like the United States or the European Union. However, they will, let's say, you're going to see a contraction regarding standards of living and economic growth overall. Now, the economic growth in most developed nations stagnated just before COVID. And, well, I'm not going to get in why COVID happened or anything like that, but you do the math. Is right now, they're stagnated and they are on these political biases and so on. So, like you say on the street, they got soft. And that's it. And most likely, you're going to see a decrease in standards of living for first world nations, G7 nations, that actually you are seeing right now, standards of living for the average citizen of the G7 nations and their satellite partners is decreasing. And something that bad economic policies, recessions that are being prolonged, And this is just the nature of the beast. Now, regarding the BRICS nations, first, I know I have to start that most of these nations are not particularly democratic. However, they have some economic performance on the past couple of decades to show off, especially China. That China, of course, I'm not going to get into the political system. It's complex. I know it's not a democracy. However, they have been delivering results regarding infrastructure, trade to the rest of the world, economic development. They pull out of poverty around 800 million people on the past 3 or 4 decades. So the results are there. Russia itself, since the start of the special operation, I'm not going to get into the politics of that. I'm not saying that support that kind of thing. However, they have been resilient regarding the operation and the consequences of such operation, like the sanctions by the United States that have backfired against the European Union and the standards of living of their citizens, the European Union citizens. And now Russia, the economy, and is poised to grow on 2023, according to official data, not only by the Russian government, but also by Western sources. Also, you have to add Brazil that is the largest economy in Latin America regarding GDP, a big commodity juggernaut, but also with decent standards of living for Latin American standards, and also very important regarding geopolitics, not only in Latin America, but throughout the rest of the world. So it's a country very interesting, a lot of things that have to be done over there in Brazil. And also you have China. Probably China has the most promising future right now, is one of the biggest economies in the world, is right now currently the most populated nation in the world, a little bit over 1.4 billion inhabitants, billion people, 1.4 billion people, billion with a B. And if you see a decent economic development and standards of living and the opportunities for these people in India that have a great human capital, so they're very crafty and well-educated and so on. Of course, India is still very lagging regarding standards of living, but the trend is that it should be increased on the next couple of decades. So that will make India one of the top economies in the world regarding nominal GDP. So you add up all of this, let's say, promising future of all of these emerging markets that most of them have delivered some significant results, despite the fact all of the politics and human rights and democracy and so on, that of course that's something that should not be ignored. However, the good results, it neither should be ignored as well. Also, we have to mention that there are another 5 new members on the BRICS groups. We have Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Ethiopia. And of course, most of these nations are big Middle Eastern nations that contribute a lot to the group. And you have Ethiopia that, well, is probably the weakest member right now on the BRICS group. And now we have to add Venezuela. Venezuela is right now one of the 20 plus countries waiting to be approved as a de facto officially BRICS member. And what brings Venezuela to the table? First, well, simple is oil. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. And I know that meanwhile, the Western world are going to these ESG policies, Green New Deal, all of these pretty on paper policies regarding energy, but in practice, they are expensive, inefficient, and is gonna bring some drawdown regarding standards of living for their cities. Meanwhile, the fossil energy, the hydrocarbon energy, still going to be around the next 20, 30 years. Maybe after that could be something else. I don't know. I'm no Nostradamus. However, these particular BRICS nations, especially the top heads, the leaders, are a very pragmatic group. Maybe they are not as fancy regarding human rights and democracy, so on, but they want results, not only for themselves, but also from their fellow members. On this particular sense, what they want regarding Venezuela is sanity, stability, structure, in order to make things, get things done, to see results, and Venezuela doesn't have to do that much. With a mediocre results regarding the Venezuelan government administration, you can get such results. Because Venezuela is very strategic, not only regarding, of course, oil, but also another commodities, also soft commodities, agriculture, of course, agricultural commodities, and a strategic location on the Americas, so on the dead center of the American region. Also, it's a beautiful place. I mean, it has 30 million people plus 30 million people, well educated, with great human capital, and also a very interesting place to see further growth into the future. Now, how likely is that we're going to see Venezuela as an official member of the BRICS nations on this particular year, 2024? Well, right now it's a 50-50 shot. First, let's start by politics. Venezuela has a great relationship with the government, first of Brazil. Ignacio Lula da Silva is good friends with Nicolas Maduro and the Venezuelan government. So you have a great ally. Also, they are neighboring countries. Afterwards, you have Russia. Venezuela and Russia have great diplomatic relationships. Recently, just by the days of the announcement, the Russian Chancellor or Foreign Affairs Minister Sergei Lavrov visited Venezuela yet again, so a regular customer here in the country. And is poised, there is a upcoming meeting, summit, between the President Nicolas Maduro and, of course, the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Besides your particular political bias, one of the discussions that they're going to be having is regarding BRICS, and most likely Russia is going to give the blessing to Venezuela. Now, regarding China, you remember Venezuela has a very good diplomatic relationship and dependency of the Chinese government. The relationship got a little bit stagnated the past 4 or 5 years. However, Maduro visited just last year, covered it here on the channel. He visited Beijing and Shenzhen. He met with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, and they are maybe considering the idea of also giving the blessing to Venezuela in order to join BRICS nations. Venezuelan representatives have been having meetings and summits with Indian foreign affairs representatives, not something very fancy official between Maduro and President Modi from India, but I don't see India halting the join of Venezuela to the BRICS nations. And lastly, we have South Africa, that Venezuela has a pretty good diplomatic relationship with South Africa, nothing big, nothing very close, but they get along very well, so it should not be an issue. We have the new members of the BRICS nations, great relationships with Iran, also good relationships with the Emirates. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. Remember, they are together, they have deals together with both are big members of OPEC nations, so they get along pretty much fine. Egypt, nothing crazy about Egypt. It's not neither good or bad. And lastly, Ethiopia, I don't see how that can affect the relationship as well with the BRICS nations overall. So regarding that particular issues, the relationship between Venezuela and the other BRICS nations is or either very good or just okay. Not a big feud with any of those nations right now. And I see maybe not this year on 2024. I will be surprised if that happens, but I mean, there's a great probability of that happening this year in 2024. So let's see if that happens. I will be watching on this channel.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.